There we go. So this meeting is being recorded. We're going to do a presentation from 7 to 8. We will stop around 8 o'clock if that feels right for your questions, and then we'll proceed from there until about 9. And we're recording, and Professor Pritchard, we're delighted to have you back for part 3 of this. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It's great to do it 3 parts for this because there's so much rich history at Shandaken, and so and Phoenicia. So I'll just do a little smudge, more of a symbolic gesture in this case, but you can all kind of imagine and smell that smell of sage wafting into your Zoom room. There you go. Just get things started. And also, I often do a welcome song. This is actually a Hopi shaker. And I'm just going to do a welcome song. It's a Mi'kmaq song. And I tend to do it a lot to welcome people, to start things out in a friendly manner. So we go. So to the people of Shindaki, or Shandaken, and Phoenicia, I say, welcome. You-eh-hi-ya, hey, you-eh-hi-ya. You-eh-hi-ya, hey, you-eh-hi-ya. Way-hi-ya, hey, yo, yo, way-hi-ya, hey, yo. You-eh-hi, way-hi-hi, yo, way. You-eh-hi-ya, hey, you-eh-hi-ya. You-eh-hi-ya, hey, you-eh-hi-ya. Way-hi-ya, hey, yo, yo, way-hi-ya, hey, yo. You-eh-hi, way-hi-hi, yo, way. You-eh-hi-ya, hey, you-eh-hi-ya. You-eh-hi-ya, hey, you-eh-hi-ya. Way-hi-ya, hey, yo, yo, way-hi-ya, hey, yo. You-eh-hi, way-hi-hi, yo, way. You-eh-hi-ya, hey, you-eh-hi-ya. You-eh-hi-ya, hey, you-eh-hi-ya. Way-hi-ya, hey, yo, yo, way-hi-ya, hey, yo. You-eh-hi, way-hi-hi, yo, way. Okay, thank you. That's the welcome song, one of many, I'm sure. And it's again, the Hopi shaker. And so in the past, I've talked about Phoenicia's ancient history, and that may sound at first like you're talking about somewhere else in the world, because people talk about ancient Phoenicia, but really Phoenicia as we know it in New York has also a very ancient history as part of the Shindaki, or the land of spruce and hemlock. And just briefly, there was a chief Shandaken who probably named himself after spruce and hemlock in the Pine Orchard area, which is on the other end of Route 214, which he apparently walked. The legend has it that his daughter had been killed, and so he left, and he walked along that lonely trail, and he came to Phoenicia, and probably set up Fort Shandaken, but came to live there, and the whole area is called Shindaki, or Fort or Shandaken now today. And so it has a very mystical history in many ways. There's lots of different aspects to that. Very many sacred rivers, and there's the sources of 7 rivers lie within Shandaken. But today I want to talk about the mountains, and I'm going to include, for today's purposes, spreading it out and sharing about Overlook Mountain, which is kind of on the edge, all the way over to Halcut Mountain, and to the divide between the Esopus watershed and the Delaware watershed. That whole area has many sacred mountains. And one of the things that I'm going to stress is that among Native people, scenery is very important for ceremony, because they didn't have television, but they like to have really remarkable, dramatic things to look at. So scenery was important, and the idea of an overlook, with a long view, was very important also. And there's not really been a lot of scholarship, but Dr. Eisenberg at SUNY many years ago discovered this was true through archaeology. but it's also part of the oral tradition, which I share. So what I want to do is go right into the PowerPoint that I created to help us with this. So I hope that you can see that. I'm gonna make sure you can all see it, but I can't see you. So I'll go right ahead, and if there's something either wrong with audio or visual, you gotta let me know. Closer to Paradise, the high peaks of Shandaken from an indigenous standpoint, sponsored by Phoenicia Library. So this is Ancient Phoenicia 3, because we've had from, I guess, February, March, and April, we're doing one every month. And this is probably the last one because I'm running out of hot topics. But, you know, I'm sorry this painting is fuzzy, but it's actually the precipice that's at the Devil's Kitchen between Saugerties and, Palinville, and at the Great Falls there. Sorry, it's fuzzy. I've stood there many times. It's dramatic. So first of all, the teachings I'm going to share that relate to Shandaken are really based on the Algonquin or Algonquin-Node people's beliefs and spiritual practices. And in Munsee, because Munsee, Delaware is the language of Ashokan and Shandaken and Phoenicia, Chi-Atukwogan means the race of people that wear the deer skin. And the colored areas of this map are areas that are traditional to the Algonquin speakers or the Chi-Atukwogan. And this range of people is pretty much identical to the range of the northern boreal white-tailed deer, which is Atuk. And so leave it at that. So we're over here in this area in the blue, which represents the Munsee and other Delaware. So there's a lot of richness to the geography, and it's in various dimensions, various aspects of the land. You can see the traces of the native people and the beliefs, and the use of the land is very idiosyncratic, but also very consistent in how they use the land. And just as a sketch I made of the Hudson River going up the middle and the different tribal territories. The Wappingers on the right or east, and Mohican in the north, and these are all Munsee people in the west. So this is a map I made of the upper Catskills. No, our area is down here. This trail is now 28, and there is Gawiensink, this village here at the very edge of this watershed is, and this is a ridge or a mountain here. Gawiensink means Gawien is Seneca for harmony in the universe, universal harmony, and the Sink is a place in the Munsee language, so it's bilingual, and that is now Pine Hill. And this red line again, 28, going all along Esopus Creek, and so that's what we are going to talk about, all these mountains here. And so there are mountains throughout this area, the Catskills. This part over here on the west of the Shawnee were brought in by treaty up near Utsayantha Mountain, which is another sacred mountain with a very nice view to the west, if you ever go up there. And this is the Delaware watershed or Delaware Valley, and this is all Esopus Munsee and Minisink Munsee over here. And this is just Esopus Munsee, and the two are very similar, Minisink and Esopus Munsees. And they are, people call them Delaware. That term started to be used about 1630, but the word Lenape wasn't used until as a tribal name until actually almost in the 1800s. Now in this whole area here, this is this Schoharie Valley, it was Mohican and then it became Mohawk after 1300, and a very interesting history. And it some of our local history leaks over into that, you're going to see, in a surprising way. Beyond that, to the north is the Catskill watershed, and that's Mohican. So there is the term Wall of Manitou seems to have some credibility, even though we don't think of the word wall as necessarily being a standard Native American word, but in fact they had walls made of stone for various purposes, not necessarily for housing. But this painting's by Victoria Roland Musa, who was actually Apache who lived here. And this is a view of this wall of Manitou. And there, what I'm going to be talking today about is overlooks, which, as far as I can tell, the Munsee word seems to have been lost, but the Dutch kikeout was a direct translation. And there is one in Columbia County. It's an overlook that looks directly at the Wall of Manitou, which is like a 14-mile-long shrine to the native people. And so that's one that's outside of our area. But there are kikeouts within the Wall of Manitou area, especially overlook. So just a little bit about the ancient past. This is actually from over in Dutchess County, but maybe Mohican, but these are adzes and, you know, a banner stone made of stone, and these are probably 3,000 years old. They're very finely made. Now, in terms of the Delaware, you have the Munsee and the Unami people are further south. And the Munsee seem to be developed first. The Minisink phase is 1,000 to 1,600, and that's the, as you see, the yellow is Minisink or Munsee, and that has to do with the Minisink Island, you know, which is over on the Delaware River. This is the Hudson, this is the Delaware, and that's the Delaware. So the yellow is this whole early development, 1,000 of the Minisink phase, and then Bowman's Brook, or what became Unami, started 11,000, and that's this area, especially Bowman's Brook, is in Staten Island, and it spreads and has a focus over here near Philadelphia. And the two really have been side by side. The Unami generally moved south of the Raritan very early on, but this culture stretches definitely into western Rhode Island. And there's also the Clasons Point Phase, starts in 1300, and that's what we call Wappingers today. And it's directly next to it, and in fact, overlays the earlier culture of the Minisink and Munsee. Combined, this is more in depth, we won't go there. Okay, well, the important point is that in Algonquin culture, we associate altitude with levels of the spirit world. I took this photo myself, I think. The burrows range from Phoenicia, and they're very dramatic mountains, but I think anyone today could see how inspiring they are, how magical they look. It's like a dream, like of a heavenly realm, and they totally got that and loved you know, that kind of experience. So they would go to mountaintops to have vision quests and retreats and to pray and to heal. And that's exactly the kind of view that they would seek at various times in their life for upliftment, literally. And in fact, the levels matter. I think a lot of the information about which altitudes represent which appropriate functions or behaviors, some of that may be lost, but some of it we know. We can tell by what kind of sacred monuments or sites are left behind from like 800 feet in altitude from the sea to 1,100 has a special kind of status somehow. And beyond that is even greater status. So you can imagine looking at this picture, you know, if you're from the area, you know these scenes are very common, but people would make pilgrimages to see such scenes. I'm going to go into detail about that. So because altitude is so important, then a mountain was literally stairway to heaven. And then, you know, years before Led Zeppelin. And so here we have these trails. You have a trail, a crossing of trails, some of which might be native trails, we don't know, but Slide Mountain, Cornell Mountain is a very dramatic. Slide Mountain has the giant ledge where you can look over for quite a distance. Terrace Mountain, same thing. And, you know, others. So this is a trail that has literally stairway built into it. Now, those are more recent, but, you know, illustrates the concept. This is an important trail that now is like a stairway. And the view philosophically is that a mountain was your stairway to the higher realms of spirit, to the more pure, closer to the light, you might say, to the sun. Now, this is from Native New Yorkers, which I want to mention is right now experiencing its 20th anniversary as a published book, and I want to do a lot of Native New Yorker events. I guess these three have been in their own way, but it's a book that came out in 2002, May 1st, 2002, and made a big splash then because of the circumstances. And originally the manuscript was 1,000 pages, and I called the publisher and I said, are you interested in a book called Native New Yorkers? He said, yes, I want it. We'll publish it, whatever it is. I like the title. I said, well, it's 1,000 pages. And he says, well, that's too many. We need it at 500. I said, how do you shorten a book to 500? He says, just cut out every other word. Well, that's what the editor wanted. And, so a year later or so, it came out 500 pages, hardback, and made a big splash. So I'll read this to you. As with many ancient cultures around the world, the Lenape, and I use that word for people's convenience, Mohicans of the Hudson Valley reserved the mountains for fearless hunters of game and also fearless seekers for God. As Manitou is found at the highest of 12 levels of heaven, parallel to the levels of clouds in the sky. This is how we speak about it. So one ascends to God by climbing the mountain, not just symbolically, but in fact. It is said that the power of spirit increases as you climb higher, that most people are not pure enough to withstand that power for very long and come back down the valley sooner or later. Some Algonquin thought says such an ascent can make you crazy if you're not ready for it. The wall of Manitou is so tall, it is said to reach halfway to heaven. And that's that stretch of mountains right from Woodstock all the way up almost to Albany. And that's right along the river and just back a bit. No one lived up there in the old days, and few live there today. But the Munsee and Mohican would go up to that top berth, halfway to heaven, to get a taste for the afterlife and to do a 4-day fast alone with no one near but God. So that's a quote from Native New Yorkers. Now, if you can see my screen, the way you would measure it, the 12 levels, is you put your hand out full length at an angle so that you tuck your thumb in, so your pinky is right against the horizon, and then you go to where your thumb was, and then you do that again and again, and that's the first 4 levels against the horizon. So that you see the clouds in that area, that'd be the first 4 levels of heaven, the first 4 level of clouds in the sky, as the Munsee would say, and then you go all the way to the apex, the sky, and that's 12 hands or 12 levels of clouds. So it's fairly methodical. I know at first it sounds like a little cloudy, a little misty, but it's not. It's fairly specific. Okay, here we go. More, believe it or not, there's somebody actually talks about this in writing. 12 levels of clouds in the sky. In the Cass-Trowbridge questionnaire, which was sent out or handed out to Native Americans in the 1820s in what's now Detroit, which was the Northwest Territory, created by Cass-Trowbridge, two gentlemen. And by the way, I think it's a marvelous idea that somebody finally thought by 1820 to actually ask Native Americans what they think. It was a revolutionary idea. And it turned out well. Cass writes, do they believe in subordinate deities, and by what names should they distinguish them? So answer. And again, these answers are by individuals, and sometimes they can vary. They believe in 12 subordinate deities placed in different grades, descending from highest to lowest. They think the lowest is on earth among them, but invisible, noticing all their actions, which he communicates to the next deity, and so forth, one to the other, until it is communicated to the Supreme Being. So Cass writes, the concept of 12 heavens, each presided over by a Manitou, which, by the way, literally means spirit, who repeated the prayers of the Indians until they reached the Creator on high, was an important part of the Delaware religious pattern. Thus, a supplicant repeated his prayers 12 times. And that's from the Delaware Indian Westward Migration, page 113, by C.A. Westlager, one of the major writers in all of this native study. And so it literally is saying that there are 12 levels of heaven in the sky. And so by Delaware, that includes the Muncie and the Supus Muncie of our area. The Delaware and Muncie interviewed in the Castrobridge Material Questionnaire said, and by the way, this may be a little off topic, but maybe not. It was in the same section. The world will be at an end when the whites get into full possession of it, that these souls only after death will be accountable and punishable or rewarded. So that's a little scary. But I thought in these days of what looks like, was that, what's the word for that? The final days, some people think, but it's not. But they're warning, possessing land at all was not the native way. And they noticed this was the European way. And they're basically saying when all the land is sold and it's all in private hands, then there will be kind of an end of the world thing. So that's their view. They didn't believe in that. Now, this is an inner geography, and this is too much for us to go into a lot of detail, but here's these 12 levels of Manitous, living humans. This is the earth plane. This is the base level of clouds in the sky, which is where we are. And there's a medicine wheel with the 4 directions on it and the 4 winds. And then this is how these different elements line up. So there's these 4 directional arrows for the 4 directions. And in each one, there's an element and various birds and entities. And then right above that, at the first level of clouds, above that is the land keepers, who are ancestral guardians. The word ancestral guardian seems to be a good translation of the word for land keepers around the New World, if you want to call it that, North America and South America. And this met with Kogis a few weeks ago who call them ancestral guardians, and that's fine with me. I call them land keepers, as do the Mayans, by the way. So then there's these various Manitous, and you can go and look at the recording if you want to study this. And there's various specific entities for Oweyala. So is for the that's for the air. Kakashahanakse is for grandfather whirlwind. And over here you have Watuno Oase for water in the west, and Manituisk for mountains. And then you get the solar realm here, but above the solar realm, above that 7th level where the sun goes, that's as high as the sun goes. That's also the top of the mountain. That's as high as mountains go. And then you have several more layers of Manitous, which are the stellar Manitous, which have to do with the eternal stars. So this is just a slight introduction. Anyway, this is part of Delawarean cosmology, not the state, but the Muncie people, mini sinks. The natural world is filled with a wide variety of spirit beings who interact with each other in complex ways. There are 12 levels of clouds in the sky, each with a head Manitou. Each level has a medicine wheel with 4 directions, and they each have up, down, and center. So there are 7 to each one. So it's very complex. Here we see a physical level where living beings live, plus the dream level, I guess, is part of this 2nd level where the land keepers and magical beings live. And when we climb a tall mountain, we gain access to these upper levels of cloud beings. Now, my understanding is that the land keepers, they've been dead a long time. They used to be elders who did a certain ceremony and became land keepers. And in the afterworld, they continue to watch over the earth world and Mother Earth, if you can understand that. And they can go to any level. And in terms of geographical location, they often sit on top of mountains and watch over the land. So this is from another source, more of the, I found, in anthroposophy, Blavatsky and theosophy, a number of references to this same idea, which I believe came through a man named Andrew Jackson Davis, who was, I am totally convinced, is Native American, and Lenape or Muncie. So 7 planes using the earth analogy. So analogizing to science, you have solids in this plane, and then there's a water level and a troposphere in the atmosphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, and exosphere. These are actual levels of clouds in the skies according to science. And this is an interesting one. I did not make this. This is from the internet. But somebody said our universe is an atom in the infinity at the physical layer. All of our observations are just of this layer. Think about that. That is, we only see the rocks. But there's much more to life than just the physical world, especially in the Algonquin spiritual view, which is preserved by the Midewiwin people, by the way. These forces affect the physical later, but from above, and we preserve the artifacts, but not the source. And again, that reflects the Algonquin teachings, which came through Andrew Jackson Davis, who was friends with Blavatsky, and she copied him on certain things, and not all. She wrote a lot of things that were not necessarily the same, but this is. And we have also from similar traditions, the 7 rays of light. And this one, I don't know if I agree with exactly with the colors, but there's planetary associations: physical, emotional, mental, intuitional, and spiritual. So these are like 5 layers of clouds in the sky that have to do with the different planes. Monadic has to do with the monad, or the soul, and the individual soul. Algonquins have a whole view of the a person's soul, which is corresponding with what people call the blood soul, which is hard to explain, but it's like the shadow soul is the spiritual part of your soul, and that is basically it's a vessel that holds your light, and it's the same light that's everywhere, and of course the divine. So Vulcan, I think, is really Mars here. And this is a much more complex thing. If you want to go back and look at this later in the recording, this is from the Theosophist from 1899, and from the Secret Doctrine, which is Blavatsky. And again, some of her ideas come through Andrew Jackson Davis, who was one of our local Lenape mystics, but he wrote a lot of books. And he predicted a lot of scientific discoveries years before. Like, for example, I think Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto were all foreseen by him, and apparently black holes. You have to study to figure that, but he's not so much a popular figure right now. And here's 3 different models of the spirit world, and I believe they all make sense. They don't conflict with each other. There's different ways of looking at it. And again, something to look at later in your free time on this video. So, there's a circular aspect, but also a layered, or people call them the stack of pancakes here, and the source. And that generally does correspond with Algonquin views of the plains, but also of mountains. I believe the mountains are, whether they're manifestations or not, it doesn't matter. It's like the mountains bring you into those levels of the sky, and therefore spiritually. And the Tibetans believe that Mount Kailash, called Mount Sumer by some, has 9 levels with whirling discs that generate energy on each level. So there is a kind of a magnetism that's in a lot of mountains, all of them actually. And again, you can look at this later, but this is more of a Tibetan view. And you have the 7 layers of words. The number 7 is incredibly important in Algonquin culture, and therefore in the Munsee culture, 7 is generally the go-to number for anything. There's 7 directions. I mean, it's a long list of 7s. There's 7 openings in the body, and I guess in the head, and just many. I can't go into the 7 notes or whatever, but basically 7 everything. There's 7 points to the maple leaf. That's a whole nother topic. So above the 7th level, which is where the mountain goes to, then there's a whole level above the mountaintop, which is Father Sky, as we would say, and Mother Earth is the other direction. The stars of the Milky Way are spoken of often in Munsee, Delaware spirituality and lore. They're seen as footprints of departed souls, which are on their way west and even closer to paradise. So again, you can look at these later, but this is just a diagram of the Milky Way, and this is the black hole, which actually in this diagram, I didn't make this, but it corresponds with different planes as well. So that's somebody's view of that. Makes sense. Okay, so this is from, remember I talked about Andrew Jackson Davis, and one of his earliest and most important books is The Great Harmonia. And he wrote like a zillion books. After the individual souls leave this planet, they ascend to the 2nd sphere of existence. Here, all individuals undergo an angelic discipline by which every physical and spiritual deformity is removed, and symmetry reigns throughout the immeasurable empire of holy beings. The inhabitants of the second sphere will ultimately advance to the third, then to the fourth, and then to the fifth, and lastly to the sixth. This sixth sphere is as near the great positive mind as spirits can ever locally or physically approach. It is greater than all of the others. It encircles infinity. It is in the neighborhood of the divine aroma of the deity. It is warmed and beautified infinitely by his infinite love, and it is illuminated and rendered unspeakably magnificent by his all-embracing wisdom. In this ineffable sphere, in different stages of individual progression, will all spirits dwell. They will be held together by the attractive emanations of deity that has to do with love, like the safe protection of an infinite belt, which will embrace the entire sphere and which will reside incalculable multitudes of created and externalized souls. So he's very wordy, but it's beautiful poetry, and it goes on and on. He flows into, I don't know how many, 60 books or something, and influencing almost everybody of the 19th century. Everybody that you ever heard of in the 19th century had some contact with him, and even Abraham Lincoln and Sojourner Truth and Edgar Allan Poe studied with him and wrote some of his teachings about the discovery of Pluto and other amazing things. So that's the Great Harmonia, Spiritual and Celestial Universe, and that's from page 251 and 2. If you want to find that book, you know, the Poughkeepsie, Adrian's library in Poughkeepsie has a collection of his artifacts, of his personal belongings, because he lived in Poughkeepsie, and they have his books, some of the original editions. They're very valuable and wonderful to look at. So I encourage you to look into Andrew Jackson Davis. You want to understand more about this whole mysticism of the Algonquins. And he never used that word. He had to be really secretive. One of the reasons some of the lore is about him is that when he was born, it was during the, he was Native American. He's being born during the election of Andrew Jackson. And so his uncle named him that so that no one would basically kill him if things got out of hand, because the only people that would probably kill him were fans of Andrew Jackson. So if he's named that, he'll live a long life. And he did live a very, very long life. He actually used his medicinal knowledge in the Civil War and became a medic, and a highly decorated medic in the Civil War, and then went into, actually became a doctor. Again, here's another amazing source, Lewis Henry Morgan's book, The Indian Journals. This is quite a book, Importance of Altitude in Algonquin Culture. And this is a Shawnee person talking to a Catholic, but it was written down in this book. Father Desmet told me the following, which he had from a Shawnee who was a Catholic. He said that the residence of the Great Spirit was upon a high mountain in the midst of a large and beautiful island. Now, it's funny, I'll stop there for a moment, because Panther Mountain, right near the library in Phoenicia, is actually completely surrounded by water except one little tiny part in a great circle. It is the highest, the closest thing that I have ever seen. It's not a terribly high mountain, but it is surrounded by water, and it is, in a sense, imaginatively perhaps an island. And as I mentioned about Panther Mountain, it has a lot of mystical significance concerning it was created by a meteor, and that is in part 2 of this series. So go back and look at that. He dwelt upon the summit. From the top issues numerous streams, which descending on all sides to the plains became beautiful rivers, which abounded in fish. Now, by the way, I'll stop again. The mountain we know as Panther Mountain, right here in Chedakin, is the source, either directly or indirectly, of 7 major rivers in New York State, and therefore very sacred. Here the good and saved Indians resided in the midst of abundance. This island was surrounded by water, was reached in only one place, only by a fallen tree of supernatural length, on which the departed spirit was obliged to cross. Near the center was a grapevine bearing delicious grapes. As the spirit approached it, he became anxious to reach the fruit. If his life had been upright and good, his step was firm. If he reached it in safety and soon crossed to the island, which his eternal happiness was secure. But if he had been wicked, and when he approached the grapevine, his anxiety to reach it became equally great. He was sure to lose his footing and to fall into the rushing waters beneath, by which he was borne onward to a cold and barren and desolate country, where he was doomed to wander forever in a state of misery and famine. So, these Lenape stories tend to be kind of dramatic like that. And there are many stories about a log bridge, a rolling log bridge through that waterway, which one would have to cross on. And, if you were good to the dogs during your life, the dogs would come and help you across this river. But if you were mean to dogs, and only they would know, because they talk to each other, then they would pull you under and make sure you drown. Okay, Overlook Mountain. Okay, not technically right in Sandakan, but some of its slopes come very close, very close. I don't know if they would have made that distinction. I think they would consider it Sandakan. It is 3,136 feet in the elevation, so it does not belong in the famous 3,500 Club of the Catskills, but its spectacular views earned it special status among ancient peoples of Phoenicia and also the Wangkang Valley, which is you call Woodstock today. We find many petriforms or stone cairns here. In 1902, its south slope became the home of Bird Cliff Community, a utopian artist enclave. You see, what happens is that other peoples coming after the natives recognize this spiritual quality. It's been noticed that few Euro-Americans love the land as passionately as Native Americans do, except landscape artists. Now, some of you may find out soon that I am curating a show to start in January of next year on local landscapes in the Woodstock Artists Association Museum, and it'll be up for about 4 months, and that will be focusing on local artists. But the land, we'll look at the land through the native lens, looking at it from the Munsee perspective. What does land mean to the natives? We see that these Woodstock artists really love the land. It was really also loved by the Algonquin people. So that's what will be the focus of this WAM exhibit starting, I think, January 20th, and I'll be curating. So that includes Overlook, of course, and the eastern Overlook is called President's Rock after U.S. Grant, U.S. President, U.S. Ulysses S. Grant, who visited there. And Alf Evers says it has the best view on the Atlantic seaboard, and that's also from the London Times. So you have a picture of Overlook, and this is, of course, is 376, which used to be a trail to West Hurley. And there's a painting of that too. So this rock, you find these rocks like on top of Bear Mountain, all these sacred places to the natives. You find these kind of pointing rocks with spectacular views. And of course, as advertised, General and then President Grant came here and gave a speech here since 1873. And people still come here in awe. This is from Kingston, City on the Hudson, which is by Alf Evers. And he says that ladies of the past have been seen kissing this rock. Now, page 321, showing the eastern overlook of Overlook Mountain, which is said to offer the greatest overlook on the Atlantic seaboard, again, times of London, admired by Native Americans as well as presidents who stood on this rock. So, not at the same time, but natives surely, I'm absolutely sure that natives people would come and stand on this rock to see this view. Okay, so on a clear day, one can see the White Mountains of New Hampshire. That's past Vermont. And Alf Evers, whose books were published by, guess what, Overlook Press, passed away in 2004 at the age of 100. So he lived right. And some of his paintings, he was a painter. At least one of the paintings will be in my show at the Woodstock Artists Association Museum. They have a collection that's over 100 years old. And this is, a go-to place. Not a lot of people know anymore, but it's still there, according to Alf. And it has this spectacular view, so go on a clear day. And you'll see why Native Americans really liked the Catskills and really liked these high mountains, because they really do give you almost at least the impression of a view into heaven. And I was going to do a whole section on the Tibetans on Mead Mountain, because they have the same belief pretty much as the Algonquins here, and they built the Tibetan monastery. And a Tibetan told me they chose Mead Mountain because of the long view of that overlook. They said it's very important to the Tibetans to have that, to free your soul looking at it. So that's part of why they're here. Now there's this word kikeout or kakiat, which is based on the Dutch word kijken, to look. Don't know what Overlook Mountain's original name was for sure, but certainly it was a geological formation known to natives as a sacred overlook, which a native word for a viewpoint is kokinium. Muncie for high point is kun kwat. You know what the word is. People would not live in a kikeout, which is the Dutch translation, but would travel far to gather on top of one at the most scenic spot. And by the way, at a certain point in history, most Muncie, Delaware, and what do you call Lenape, spoke Dutch. They were slow to absorb English because the English was kind of standoffish, frankly. SUNY archaeology professor Leonard Eisenberg, who I mentioned before, was among the first historians and archaeologists to notice this trait. Certain ancient gathering spots had no other convenience than that of scenic beauty. South Kakiat is near Split Rock, sacred to the Ramapo, on the border between New Jersey and New York. And here you have that border here, and right in here, that way you get, Mawa, which is a native word for a gathering. This map is from my book, The Tapan Keepers of the River Crossings, and shows some of the territory included in the North and South Kakiat patents. And this is west of Nyack. And again, a Dutch translation of a lost Muncie word, but Nyack may be that word for all we know, because Nyack means a place to stand where you can see far. That's pretty much the same thing, isn't it? Now, this is a nice view that gives you a sense of space. This is from Huckleberry Point Trail, fairly near Overlook. Now, other famous Native American overlooks, and there are many, here's just a few. Sam's Point, which they called Awasting, which means basically the other side, or seeing the other side, over there, like far away. Kyle Rock, which is in Poughkeepsie, that was an overlook. Mount Beacon was an overlook, and that was named after the river that ran beside it. And what was that? Prairieville's Columbia County, that's the one I mentioned, which has a view of the Wall of Manitou where you can see the whole thing. That's one of the few places you can. It's very high up. At Prairieville, you not only see, the Wall of Manitou, but you also see the mountains in Massachusetts and beyond. Kondiaronk Belvedere. Well, I got ahead. Okay, let me go back. Okay, Prairieville. Okay, Washington in New Jersey is the great, beautiful mountains. Peekamoose is a mountain named after the beavers, but it's known for its high peak and overlook. Slide Mountain, also known for the overlook at the Great Ledge. The giant ledge is there, which gives you a clear view. Kondiaronk Belvedere was named after, it's on Mount Royal in Montreal, named after the Huron chief, plus the word for a beautiful view in French. And the Huron chief, there's a new book that's selling like hotcakes called, what was it called? I forgot. But, I'm forgetting. It's like a bestseller right now, but a lot of it's about this Huron chief, Kondiaronk. I'm just blanking out on the title now, sorry. Poconos. The Poconos are also overlook mountains of this nature. Poquineu means it is high up in Muncie. High Point, New Jersey counts. Pine Orchard, which is just north of Shandaken, which is probably the original name where it came from. And I have to mention Utsayantha, the nation of the little people, which is in the Shawnee language, and they were brought up by treaty in 1696, and to be allies to the Muncie, and they named that mountain Utsayantha. It does not mean anything in Lenape, but it means the nation of the little people, which are the 3-foot-tall land guardians who are not land keepers, but they're more like, some people compare them to fairies. The Algonquin word Nyack has been translated as a place to stand where you can see far, which may be the original term, but I can't prove that. But all of these wonderful places are places you can go and you can have a spiritual experience looking over miles and miles of beautiful scenery. And sorry, I don't remember that book, but it'll come to me. You've probably read it already, and I'm sure it's in the library. Um, just blanking out. Okay, another great view, very spiritually uplifting. High peaks. I think these peaks. Maybe these are the high peaks are very famous for the Shandaken area in the Catskills. Very high, and people climb them. They're usually not too hard to climb if you're in shape. Indian Head is noted. It looks like an Indian's head when he's lying on his back. Black Dome, there's Black Dome Press. West Kill is very important. I'm going to talk about that. Hunter Mountain is the highest mountain of all these high peaks. Twin, Fly, Thomas Cole Mountain, named after the painter who popularized the mountains. Rusk, Bear Pen, Wyndham Heights. This is Cole's view of paradise from the Thomas Cole house, is one of his paintings. This is the view from his house. You can see all of these important mountains, all of which had significance to Native Americans, from the porch from his house in Catskill. And that's a painting he did corresponding with his mountains. This is the actual photo view. This is a photo, and this is the painting. So these two, you can see it's the same view. Kaaterskill Falls, called the Garden Rock by natives, the secret abode of a Manitou, which is a female Manitou or Manitouwak. She separated the night from the day. She made the stars and moon and wove the clouds for the Great Spirit to rest his head upon. One day a Munsee traveler came and saw many great gourds hanging from trees, and he reached for it. It broke, and the water poured out, and he fell 260 feet into a pool of water where he drowned. After realizing that what her magic had done, she regretted it. And she went down to the pond to look at his face, and she fell in love with him, but could not bring him back from the dead. Apparently that wasn't one of her magic powers. She placed a rainbow around him and ascended back to the top where her tears fed this great waterfall to this day. Well, that's also from native New Yorkers, quoting Washington Irving's sketchbook. But what's interesting is that there are often rainbows at the bottom of this waterfall, so it's true. There must be a Manitou, or Manitouisqua, who built this, and made this waterfall and placed that rainbow there, because it's still there sometimes. And here's Kaaterskill Falls in a painting, and this is an Indian Head Mountain. You kind of imagine an Indian head face. Very many legends. So one of the most famous one of this is Hobbamock Mountain, a giant that became angered when the Wappingers people forgot how to speak to animals. He threw a lot of stones, but then he was put to sleep by an even greater being and laid him to rest here and turned him into a mountain. So that's a similar story. Hobbamock story, probably familiar to our Munsee people. So I just told the story. Hobbamock. And there's a book, The Legend of Hobbamock, which of course should be in the Phoenicia Library. It's very good. Now, Hunter Mountain, this is the precipice. You saw a picture of Fuzzy. This is a better picture. This precipice, I believe, is symbolic or referencing the precipice that's at what's called the Devil's Kitchen. And it's actually one thing about what river that is. The Platical Clove here. And, Socrates is over here. But it's really has trees all around. But you can stand right on that edge and look straight down, and there's a waterfall that drops 300 feet. So this is Hunter. Hunter is very steep. And a lot of these, we can see different kind of cairns along Devil's Path here. So this is from Washington Irving again. She dwelt in the highest peaks of the Catskills and had a charge of the doors of day and night to open and shut them at the proper hours. She hung up the new moons in the skies. We're getting up to a new moon soon, May 1st. Cut up the old ones into stars. In times of drought, if properly propitiated, which means you should put tobacco down for her, she would spin light summer clouds out of cobwebs and morning dew, send them off from the crests of the mountains, flake after flake, like flakes of carded cotton, to float in the air until dissolved by the heat of the sun. They would fall in gentle showers, causing the grass to spring, the fruits to ripen, the tobacco to sprout, and the corn to grow an inch an hour. Wow. If displeased, however, she would brew up clouds black as ink, sitting in the midst of them like a bottle-bellied spider in the midst of its web, and when these clouds broke, woe betide the valleys. That's one of his most famous quotes, I think, from his sketchbooks, which I quoted also in Native New Yorkers. And now it's a ski resort. I don't know. Things always seem to end up a commercial venture, whatever it is. Okay, so this is Wamataka Nesse, the little hunter, little spirit boy with a bow and arrow, a servant of Kitchi Manitou and helps native people. But we really know he must be Muncie, right? And here he is, protector of the Lenape and Wappingers. And then this is Devil's Tombstone, which I talked about before, and I think show number 2. And the notch between Plateau Mountain, which was formerly called Stony, that's at 3,500 peak, and Hunter Mountain, which is way up 4040 on Woodside Creek. And it's on the Hammonasset line, which is not shown on this map. But here's the Devil's Tombstone right here, Notch Lake. These are all mystical spots to even today to our local Muncie. Another district of these high peaks: Graham Mountain, Panther Mountain, which of course is the middle of Shandaken, North Dome, Sherrill, Double Top, Big Indian, which, you know, that's near Big Indian Park. There's a gathering coming up this weekend. Halcott Mountain, which I'll talk about, Fir Mountain, Balsam Mountain. They're very high peaks. Mamindaatsi is the spirit of war, or the panther. This panther has a long tail. He drops meteorites from the sky, and war can occur in the direction from which the meteorites come. He works under great spirit. Now, as I talked about in program number 2, the panther is actually golden colored, and its tail streams behind him when he runs, and that resembles a meteor as it's flying. The tail of the meteor is like the panther's tail, hence Panther Mountain, made by a meteor. Now, go back to number 2 to see more about that, but here is the giant ledge and Panther Mountain in a photograph. I believe this is the ledge over to your right, and they're both famed overlook spots or kakiyat spots. And the level of sacredness to be given to Panther Mountain is almost infinite. And it's interesting that Menla is right at the base of it. And actually the Big Indian powwow grounds, which I'll be on Saturday, are also right there at the base of it. It's very sacred. So here you see an interesting map. See how I talked about that island surrounded by water in that dream in the spirit world? I talked about, well, here's Panther Mountain, and it's surrounded by water except this one spot. Or maybe there's a tree there, I don't know. But it's interesting. It's like a mountain in the middle of water, and you climb it, and you are like on a stairway to heaven. So it's part of the spiritual path. And Big Indian was named after an actual Muncie Indian, and Winnisook was his name, and a band of warriors had been successful in obtaining some cattle. He wasn't a part of that, and they're returning to their stronghold, and Big Indian, or Winnisook, was trying to admonish them to return the bulls, and they were overtaken by locals with their blunderbuss, whatever, and near the curve in the Ulster and Delaware Railroad, which is right where this statue is. And he was killed. So that seems to check out, seems to be a fairly true story. And there's the Big Indian Wilderness. And here's, as I mentioned, and there's this valley here, but here's Willowemoc Mountain. And that is direct reference to a Muncie fantastic beast who's like a reptilian, and he kills lots of people. And it's funny, his name is something after him. So Slide Mountain, Peekamoose, Friday Mountain is very important. That's actually where the Rondout Creek starts, which is one of the largest anywhere in our area. Cornell Mountain, very tall. The Wittenberg Mountain, Balsam Cap, Table Mountain, Lone Mountain. These are very tall, gigantic, impressive mountains. And any of them could have been used in some way as an overlook. According to Alf Evers, there was a rock slide on Slide Mountain in 1830, hence the name, and John Burroughs came here for his inspiration. And Peekamoose Mountain is a small lake of beavers in Esopus, Muncie. B is drinking water, key is plural. Amu is a beaver, but only in the Esopus Muncie language. And us is small. And there's a book. Maybe it's in the library, Little Beaver and the Echo.
Professor, I just
Uh,
wanted to let you know that it's just a couple minutes before 8. So whatever you
Oh,
want to
okay.
do. Okay.
Okay. We're just getting started. Okay, but Big Eagle is a story about a Muncie boy who went to the top of Peekamoose Mountain with a bow and arrow. He laid out wolf meat and hid behind the bushes waiting for a big eagle. Made it prayers to the eagle saying, "Come and let me possess one of your fine tail feathers." But then a small eagle came and the boy ran out and shooed it away saying, "You're too small, don't eat the meat. I'm saving it for a big eagle." And this kept going on and on until he shooed all these various eagles away, and then he heard this flap, 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 giant sound, and then he was engulfed in shadows on the top of Peekamoose, and he didn't even look up, but these claws came and grabbed him by the shoulders and took him to the nest where those eagles he had shooed away were still there, and the giant eagle got him to feed them from his mouth various worms. They had a great lesson. So after being humbled and the eagles left, he went back to Peekamoose Mountain. There he found a tail feather left for him. Peekamoose, Burroughs Range. Eagle Mountain. Eagle Mountain. Willowimut. Willowimut. There's Willowimut. He eats humans. Horns are elk-like, and the thunder beings constantly battle the serpent, also called Mihakuk. Underwater Panthers. Cornell Mountain, named after the president of the Ulster and Delaware Railroad. Friday Mountain is to the left. So Moshalu means land cleared by fire, and that refers to Pepacton, which is also just to the west of our area. And these are by Michael Kudish. And there's more mountains around the Pepacton, and now there's a Moshalu Parkway. And here's Otsayantha. That mountain is still there. There's a road up there, and you can drive and then take a further hike further up. In Takabachi, which is an Alabama-based dialect, it means the nation of the little people, the nature spirits. And there's a map of where Otsayantha is by the headwaters of the Delaware, but also the Schoharie. Some of the little people are also called Wematagunis, which is more generic. Mesingwes is another word for these little woodland spirits. The wee people, 3 feet tall. They're masters of the hunt, and they protect the game and the trees. Pukwajis, it's a more general term too. Not all are Mesingwes. This is the famous Mesingwe mask of the Muncie, solid face masks. Here's Bear Pen, which is a very mystical place near Halkut. Many stories about the bears in the Catskills, and the early settlers built bear pens of huge logs. They would bait them with a sheep's head or a game carcass and throw the door closed as soon as the bear was eating. And there was a Catskill story. The hunter's daughter was cornered by a bear, so he pushed her through the door, closed it, and fought the bear himself. There was a bear's pen at Lawrence's Tavern at Kiskatam, which had been a Mohican village. But Bear's Pen is right at the very edge of Shandaken. Speaking of bears, Yakwahe, the hairless bear. There might be actually a real kind of bear like this, but maybe with mange, but it's often in legends, and Alf Evers mentions the similarity with men and bears, as many writers have. And there are stories of bears doing human-like things and standing up and walking around. And the natives use bear grease in their hair to make it grow faster. And the Catskill Mountains believed that on February 2nd, the bear would come out and do a ritual, look at his shadow, and know how long winter would be. This is also still believed in Canada as a bear. If it was a long winter, he would not come out again until April 1st. And if it was a short one, he'd come out early. As his habitat disappeared, his duties were replaced by badgers and woodchucks. The word woodchuck is a Lenape word, woodchuck, for groundhog. They took these stories west with them along a trail that led them to Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, means town of little biting bugs. I'm going to skip this. But as we're going, we're running out of time, but I just want to tease you. I have another little section we can see between now and 9, which I call very, very ancient Phoenicia. There is a secret spot with several acres of ancient stone monuments situated under Great Stone Plaza at a high elevation at the edge of Shandaken. It is believed to be an ancient star map, but I can't reveal where it is. It's on private property held by the same settler family for hundreds of years. So I understand that it is now exactly 8 o'clock. So if my host will help me, I will go and we don't have any questions in the chat. We forgot to mention you can put your questions in the chat. And so should I stop sharing?
Well,
Is
yeah,
that a good idea?
maybe for a minute, and we'll just see if folks have some questions. And if they don't, then please proceed. But if you do have questions, please speak up or enter it to the chat or just unmute yourself, whatever works best for the professor.
Yeah, I'm winging it. We can just roll with it. People just ask questions because we don't have any questions in the chat. We have 15 participants on screen, so that's a manageable number. Won't be inundated. So perhaps you have questions about this whole mountain thing. So it may be new to a lot of people. Give it some time. Any comments or questions?
Well, what do you think, Professor? Should we just continue until 8:30 and then we'll take questions, and that'll give you time to, because I know you've got a lot. Oh, here's one question from Elizabeth. Are there any ley lines along 214?
Okay, well, this term is tricky because it means different things to different people. And so it would depend on what, but there are some ley lines in Algonquin territories. Almost all of them have something to do with the solar alignments, like following the path of the sun. They did that. So they would have monuments and alignments with the, the solstice. And the equinoxes too, which would be an east-west line. And I can't think of exactly the alignment with 214, but it is similar to or parallel to a solar angle, but you'd have to look at where it starts and where it ends. But that is the reverse angle, or the one of the Montauk-Hammonasset line, which is the one I basically discovered and popularized. And a lot of people have taken that. The Montauk-Hammonasset line goes from the northeast to the southwest, and that's if you're following to the southwest, then that's the is that winter sunset. So that line, yeah, okay, that would be, wait a minute, no, that's not right. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Oh, okay, so the axe, I don't know, I don't remember where that photo was taken of the trail signs. I really don't remember. It was a while ago. But yeah, it was somewhere. Well, Winnisook is a town, an Indian village site up there near Slide Mountain, they come together, and it was up near that area. So the other question was, yeah, the line of 214 goes in the opposite direction. So then that's the one that goes, if you head west on 214 towards Phoenicia, you're going towards the winter solstice sunset. But I think it's fairly close to that. But the Montauk line generally goes from the south east to the northwest. Sorry about that. And it goes all the way to the Great Lakes and to Manitou Island, which is a sacred spot. So yeah, I have maps of that. You can email me, by the way, at evan.pritchard7@gmail.com, and you see my name on the screen. But also with the website algonquinculture.org, and you can get my email from that. So and you can order books through that website, through the email again, or ask more specific questions. Let's see the. Okay, so there are other kinds of ley lines that other people of different cultures talk about, but they wouldn't necessarily be Algonquin. You know, song lines are more best known in Australia. We don't seem to have that if the evidence is very weak. So let me, are there any other questions? Okay, I hope I'm doing this right. Okay, look at that. Okay, so anybody want to hear about a giant, vast map of the universe made of stone from 3,000 years ago? If not, we can just quit. But I can't tell you where it is, but it's quite remarkable. Okay, Thursday morning, here's my story. Thursday morning, minding my own business, November 1st, 2007, a farmer and his girlfriend, and they shall not be named to protect their identities, brought me to a hillside in a remote area near the Montauk-Hammonasset line and close to the source of the Delaware River's eastern branch. What we discovered that was truly remarkable: 26 cairn towers on a steep southeastern slope, paved with flat stones now buried, that when mapped out seemed to depict the circumpolar stars of the night sky as they were on June 21st, approximately 1018 BCE. Arabic star maps date back to that time period and show the same drift. In other words, no farmer in the 1700s made all of these stone cairns in the patterns of the stars because they were the stars as they were in 1000 BC, which is not the same as they are today or as they were in 1700. So it wasn't farmers who did this. It was somebody living in 1000 BC because it's just too extraordinary an alignment. State archaeologist William Ritchie, who wrote the handbook for New York State, has dated other sites on the Montauk line as being about 1047 BC, which is still within the span of a single man's life. So something was going on. And those people, at that time, the peak culture, we call the red ochre people, for lack of a better term. So they gave me this photo to get my interest. They made this at night of what they called the gatekeeper tower, representing the head of celestial bear. And in the star map, you know, in other words, Ursa Major, the head of Ursa Major was represented by this 10-foot tower of stone, which has no mortar and has survived all these years without any mortar or cement at all. This is the side view, which is extraordinary. Again, no cement, 3,000 years, no whatever earthquakes could not shake it. The farmer called this the gatekeeper, corresponding with the top of the bear's head and the celestial bear, which you call Ursa Major. Just to their right was a large stone turtle effigy intact with the perched stepping stone tail, which is like the one at Rhinebeck, which is another program. Upwardly pointed nose pointing to the winter solstice sunrise and its fins. Now the upward pointed nose makes it look like a painted turtle, corresponding with the nose of the bear, Ursa Major. So it's very conceptual art form here, very brilliant, really, and that there's a certain kind of scaling where it looks like one thing on a giant scale, it looks like another thing on a smaller scale, and then an even smaller scale, it looks like something else, but it all fits together. Like, for example, the nose of the bear in real life kind of looks a little bit like a turtle shell, and so the nose of the bear in the in this stone constellation is also a turtle effigy. And this small headstone lies at the back of the gatekeeper tower, and it seems if these the cairns might serve as giant headstones for burials, but no human remains have ever been found. So this is a headstone that's placed at the base of the gatekeeper. Now this is really interesting. This is my discovery here. There are a number of devil's tombstones. You know, the one on 214. Well, this site has all these tiny devil tombstones. Some had fallen over. It was easily fixed. We rescued this one and we placed it in a notch in the bedrock, which makes it stand up quite securely. And guess how big wind could blow it over. But here's the notch. It's pretty deep and it fits perfectly. When set into the notch, the headstone or Manitou stone assumes a north-south alignment. Here you can see the notch because the headstone's been moved an inch to the right. And here is the the compass, so you can see how it's aligned. I mean, this is no accident. That's somebody very deliberate, and who would be interested in having little devil's tombstones everywhere. Okay, so this is a beehive type of cairn. It's actually not that common, such a perfect beehive. But in the Catskills, indigenous stone constructions are found only between 800 and 1,200 feet in altitude. Some people say 1,100 feet. Most of them would be there or below. This zone is associated with fasting and meditation, not with everyday habitation. Some can be found near the base of some of our 3,500 peaks. And so why this is, well, I think this slideshow explains why a certain type of construction or shrine would appear at a certain altitude, because the altitudes, how they knew they didn't have altimeters, but you can get an app on your cell phone that tells you exactly how high up you are. It's a wonderful toy, but you can go to various sites if you know them, and you can find out the altitude. You'll find that there's a pattern. So most of these cairns are between 800 and 1,100 feet, which is a very small range. So this is a star map from 848 BC, which is almost 3,000 years ago. This is an Arabic map, and you see they named them in Arabic, and here's the famous, this is the Ursa Major. And here, there's a correspondence here, and this is a map of some of the star towers. So the farmer made a map of stone towers and brought the star calendar along, and he thought the cairns looked something like constellations. Tower 1, which is here with the arrow, was several times larger than the others. We call it Chiefy. That was the farmer's girlfriend said, let's call it Chiefy. So I thought, well, that must be Polaris. They showed me this sketch, definitely Polaris. They equipped it, but it's equipped with a rampart surrounded by a parapet from which one could give speeches. And these speeches would be heard by a great number of people over a great distance, because remember, it's up on a hill, and it is, like I say, like this, balcony almost, and everybody in this range here would hear it clearly. And in those days, there was a stone patio of sorts, or a plaza, and that would have increased the audibility. So this cave here is right near the Big Dipper, and in the Algonquin story of the Celestial Bear, which I've told in an earlier program, there is a cigar galaxy which represents the bear's cave. Now this is actually a picture I took of Chiefy and with the farmer's girlfriend on top. This slope is all remains. It must have been the largest cairn towers ever made. Behind is a large platform or stage which is still intact, and all the other star towers would have been visible from the top of the structure. Its podium is just below the altitude of the notch between the mountains to the southeast, and similar to that of the notch of the northeast, and these are where the sun sets in the west, in the notches. That's very traditional, how they would find these places, ideal to observe the beams of solstice sunrise or sunset. This is part of the platform above the ramparts, and that's tower number 1. This is number 24, just happens to be nearby. It's triangular, and the flat wall faces the southeast. The flat stepping stone to the far right includes a shining stone, and this cairn corresponds with the star Kochab in the constellation Ursa Minor, which is also, of course, depicted. And its twin Faircad seems to have been destroyed. There was a little logging road that went through, and they destroyed Faircad. Everything else seems to be fine. Cairn 3, this looks confusing, but this is Cairn 3 up in front, and Cairn 4 is actually visible right here. And the farmer's girlfriend, which is what I'm calling it, here's the farmer, and this is this cairn visible. And these are 2 upper fainter stars in the cup of the Little Dipper. And these are called Anwar al-Farqadain and Alifa al-Farqadain in Arabic, and those are the original star names and still honored by astronomers. This is Cairn 4 up close because you couldn't see it before. Polaris is in the background, center left, you can't really see it very well. Number 4 is a 3x6 oval, 3 feet high. And a lot of these, as this one does, have altar boxes, so you can make offerings and place them in these boxes made of stone. And here's, again, the polar region. We look in this map, you can see we penciled in the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, and there's Polaris. You see that? There's that stone. All four cairns are visible of the Big Dipper in this photograph, but Cairn 13 in Megrez here has been kind of fallen over. But this is Fad, number 18, and Merak is 14 over here, and Dubé, which is a very famous rock, you can see right over here. It's very prominent. So these are still there. So this is the Gatekeeper Cairn, very beautiful. Looking to the south, seems to be solid and no chamber, corresponding with the bright star at the top of the head of Ursa Major of the Celestial Bear. And again, if you look back at the previous program of storytelling, we talked about that was associated, I believe, with a robin, and it may, in the story, may be used to cite the summer solstice. And there may have been a stone disc at the top, because there was a mysterious stone disc found right nearby. Now, the stone turtle is one of the most remarkable. Cairn 17, it's the nose of the bear, Mosquito or Omicron, and it's in the form of an effigy or spotted turtle, or it's an effigy of a spotted turtle with a deep stone shell, a steep dome shell of plain sandstones, distinct from other cairns, in excellent condition. It has a stepping stone tail perched by a hidden stone, makes an excellent ceremonial platform like the Rhinebeck turtle. The upturned nose is aligned with the southwest, and large fins are intact on the north side. So here's a picture of it in snow. And nearby, you have the Throat Star Cairn, which was where he was wounded in the story by Robin and the 200s. And I expected to find a red stone right at that point, and I was not disappointed. There was a red stone as the reflecting stone, so it represented the wound. So here's the fin. This is the nose. This is the shell, which is just like intact, just like the spotted turtle. And behind it is this perched stepping stone and a view of the notch to the southwest. And it's a direct positioning to represent the nose of the celestial bear. So there's a scaling, an artistic scaling where you go into the microcosm and you see like a whole nother statue, so to speak. And then when you go out to the macrocosm, the bigger picture, then you see another, like the bear. The peak shell of the turtle, this is the peak nose. I mean, the peak shell represents the spotted turtle, but the upturned nose also is typical. And it is a calendar turtle because it has the 13 plates on its back representing the 13 moons of the year, and 28 scoots around the outside representing the nights of each moon. And the upturned nose is pointing at 32 degrees southwest, which is the place of the winter solstice sunrise. So they thought of everything, and it's still there. Turtle effigy at the nose of the celestial bear has a perched tail. This is just looking at the tail, and this is a stepping stone tail to get to the top, exactly like the one in Rhinebeck. And they're both really on this Hammonasset line. There's the bear. There's the high notch. Okay, so the notch, the sunrise would come in the notch, and so they'd know where to look at that moment, winter solstice. Now, the Star Park may or may not be part of a bigger picture, and this is something people are wondering about. But you see, this is the Hammonasset line I mentioned. It goes across the Hudson, goes across some important spots. I had a long list that I decided to spare you this long list of these sites. But here is another bigger picture. There's stone effigies and alignments all along this line. Past, we have over here, Rokeby Manor is right on the line, and there's various other important sites just along going to Devil's Tombstone. Now we know the original petriforms were destroyed by colonial farmers, but hundreds remain. Some are hard to reach on foot, which is why they're still there. The corridor, what I'm talking about, crosses dozens of high ridges, canyons, and rivers. There never has been and never will be a roadway associated with this corridor. To construct one would be virtually impossible. And yet these structures, some of which would take days to construct each one, are similar in design. For example, most of the stone towers are made from slate or bluestone, but many of the stone towers have anomalous quartzite stones with surfaces facing the south or the southeast, halfway down. When When using flat photography, they reflect, which indicates they shone at certain times, perhaps at solstice sunrises. Towers feature a cluster of iron ore stones in other cases. And again, probably 3,000 years old. But I looked at those angles and it reminded me of something I realized was the same angle that follows the path of the sun. In Washington, D.C.'s map, you have that Pennsylvania Avenue is at the same avenue, same angle, and crosses East Capitol Street at a 32-degree angle, same as the Montauk-Hamaset line and same as the nose of the turtle. Well, not too surprising. It's aligned with New York Avenue, aligned with summer solstice. And of course, even today, there are many stone monuments in Washington, D.C. So this is from the secret architecture of our nation's capital, and here you see the 32 and the 32 crossing each other. So this is going back to the Hamaset line, who could have built it. Well, you know, the Orient people seem to have been the people of the time, a phase of Algonquin culture. And again, I'm going to skip that. I'll skip this since we're running short on time, but there was knowledge of the path of the sun among the Mohicans, for example, and Samson Occam, who was Mohican minister, knew about it, and talking about ancient inscriptions, the trail of life, the path of the sun, the beautiful white path. All these are different words for this alignment, which might be, for example, over the water, you would see an actual red path reflecting. And I'm going to skip that. Okay, so along that line, by the way, is little known Woodstock Conservancy, which is off the West Saugerties Highway, which is kind of like close to our whole Catskill, Shandaken area. It's a mile south of the Montauk-Hamaset line, you know, a short mile. Has many rock shelters and a few probable cairns, such as this one I took a photo of. And the ones in that area seem to have this kind of very deliberate laying of stones. Now, Overlook is also called Serpent Hill, an extension of the Stone Star Park. Overlook Mountain features cairns and 2 serpent mounds. Do they represent Draco? Are they aligned with the star map? Well, they're pretty far away in a say from the star map, but maybe it's a really big map. It's just, you know, to be researched. This is from the Lewis Hollow site, and there is an Overlook Mountain Center for the study of cairns there, believe it or not. So this is just 2 miles west of the line. Here you see a serpent, how you say, alignment of stones. Some people think of it as a wall. Some people think it as a effigy statue of a serpent. And this is a turtle-like cairn there. This is also at Lewis Hollow. And they call this the Grand Cairn Field for a reason. It goes on and on, up a steep mountain, very steep. And you here have a measure, I guess, a yardstick, showing you how big this is. So this is what they have there. And Ted Timmerick calls this a platforms or platforming of stones. You see that all over New England. Here's a turtle-like stone cairn. Here's a definite serpent cairn. And you might think as farmer, well, why would a farmer do this? It doesn't hold anything or do anything. And there's a shining stone, but this is at the Great Cairns as well. And there's an ore version of the shining stone. So Westkill is another whole area, which is north of the Star Park I mentioned, and that's just near Hunter Mountain, just to the west. Westkill, right? Westkill Valley. Many believe the line of stone towers at Westkill are an extension of the star map. They could represent Regulus, which, as you all you star buffs know, that on the summer solstice, I think it's Mars, aligns sometimes with this line and kind of completes the line by adding a missing dot along the line. And so they think maybe this is part of it. If true, that means the star map goes on for miles and miles. Now this is, I'll show you some cairns at Westkill, and they're like 7 of them, giant towers in a row. See, you see a couple here. There's one, and here's one. There's a long, long line of these stone towers. Could be Regulus. Here's back here is one of the 7 large towers, and here's one in the foreground. And they are at a 380-degree alignment which again doesn't have anything to do with the solstice alignment, but actually crosses it, which is weird. I mean, the conceptual art here is mind-blowing because the 318-degree line really suggests Regulus, and yet it actually crosses the Hammonasset line, which is the solstice line. So could the stone star map really stretch into the Delaware watershed and beyond? Well, wow, that would be amazing. It could be like a whole map of the universe in stone. But of course, farmers have knocked a lot of them down. But in the more remote areas, they're still existing. And these Westkill stones are some of the most easily accessed that are not knocked down. There's another one. There's like, I don't know, 10 to a dozen of these all in the same area in alignment. Now this is Taylor Cairn, very nearby in Roxbury. And this one is very intricately and neatly constructed on private property in Roxbury, miles south of the Montauk-Hammonasset line, a few miles north of the Star Park. It could represent a star, but we don't know. It's also fairly close to Utsantha Mountain, but perhaps the star map is just everywhere. More research. So the Catskill Mountains are sacred to the Munsee, Delaware, the Esopus Munsee, and their ancestors. Who their ancestors were, we don't know what they call themselves. There are many unsolved mysteries lying at the high elevations, possibly a stone map of the entire universe, and much more. Perhaps it was left behind to teach us something about the wonders of the universe that we are part of by ancestors, or even, you know, I wasn't going to go here, but I thought, why not? Maybe aliens, because it's a star map. Who knows? I don't do alien research, ancient aliens, but you know, this is a giant star map of the universe made thousands of years ago. So you can do your own research. So careful research must be done before developers destroy every trace of this incredible legacy. And here is a painting of a fire circle dance painted by Apache painter Roland Musa. And that's it. So we're back. And okay, thank you. So yes, are these remaining cairns protected? Well, that's a huge problem because how do you protect them? Thank you, Elizabeth. How do you protect these cairns? It's very important. So people at the Overlook Mountain Lewis Hollow Cairn site have been working hard on that and work with native elders, and they're working on a system to protect them, but it requires some time and money and transportation to make sure that native people are involved in a system of protecting these cairns. So the problem is that you can't really put fences around them because a lot of these take, you know, just acreage. And I don't think they want to be fenced. But the problem is once people know about them and their locations, and say if they're not on private property, you know, it's very hard to protect them. And if they are in private property, it's still hard to protect them. But the thing is also developers, you know, we're not going to necessarily say. There are some just native lands, and I think you would say it was Hurley, that is becoming endangered because developers are swarming around the edges. But in terms of this, yeah, you can check with Glenn Kreisberg at the Lewis Hollow Overlook site, is working on a kind of a movement or of an organization within his organization to protect the cairns. And it has to do with working with every town, state, county government to make them aware of the problem and to help to protect them. And again, it would involve a kind of a ad hoc, unavailable group of Native Americans who will protect them. Now, the Ramapo have many sacred sites on their land, and they're a state-recognized group, and they can maybe be able to organize, you know, some guardians, so to speak. But they don't get much cooperation from the Mawa government. So that's the ultimate question. And for the reason I don't reveal the site that I showed you, the Star Park, because it's on private land anyway, but also it's so vast an area, you couldn't really fence it in. I've been discussing, thank you. I've been discussing that with various people in the Smithsonian and all these kind of, very knowledgeable people to say, how do we protect this? And there isn't such an easy answer, but it's very important. So in others, like the Westkill site, which I showed you towards the end, that's one that is pretty accessible, and conceivably people such as myself and others could give guided tours without killing people, because it's not that dangerous to get to. You just have to basically swim across the wild stream or whatever. But that's an amazing site. It really is. And so you can drive up partway to the Westkill Road and then find them. Let me on the left. And they seem to have withstood a lot of visitors. So hopefully people behave. But the problem is one person, since there's no mortar and they're very sacred, one person could ruin 3,000 years of history and just erase it from the earth. And lately, there's been a lot of crazy things going on, people suddenly acting out violently. So shootings and whatnot. So it would be unfortunate. But I'm sharing this with you, and this will go on YouTube. And I feel, after a lot of thought, I think these particular photos will allow people to understand that Native Americans weren't savages, that the savages, some of the most savage people, were coming from across the way, if you know what I mean. And the natives had this elaborate language system and, distance of travel, and were building these very elaborate geonomic, how you say it, geographical, um, you know, pieces of art, if you want to call them. It's like each one is different, and yet it almost all looks like the same artist. And I call that the Beethoven's 10th scenario or syndrome, where you see a lot of these cairns, and it's like you get a feeling for like this artistic touch, so that if you saw another one, you'd know that it was one of those cairns, and yet it would never be exactly the same. So it's a funny thing. Then they just discovered an actual Beethoven's 10th Symphony in E flat, and you can look up online, and I think it's authentic, and they found it, in his sock drawer, and when you hear it, you say, "Oh my God, that's Beethoven," but it's all different than any of the other symphonies. So that's the way. So I mentioned this to an artist named Alex Gray over in Wappingers, and he said, "Let's do it. Let's make one that's like Beethoven's 10th. We'll make a cairn that's not like any other one cairn that looks like one of those." And we did, and it's now at the Cosm property by the gateway in the front. You can see a cairn that I actually helped to build. I think it looks nice. So any other questions? But that was the best question. It's like, yeah, how to protect them? Well, maybe you can volunteer, and just check in with Glenn Kreisberg. Is working with Doug Schwartz, who's not Doug Schwartz, well, him too, but another Doug, who's his a Native American, I guess, the Narragansett heritage protector, and they're working with accessing some of these various city governments and town governments. Thanks, Maureen. So if there are no other questions, I'll leave it at that. So this may be the the last of this series. It's been really amazing to have 3 in a row and no overlap. It's all just plowing ahead with new information that a lot of people don't know about Shandaken in like how many hours? Probably at least 5 hours of of information. But I wanted to show you these so you know that Native Americans have in the area go way back, and they have this very fantastic spiritual and artistic and cultural history right here. And one reason people know about it, because we don't want to like tell everybody that of worry about people going out and being naughty. So anyway, happy spring. May's coming, and go out and buy Native New Yorkers if you can find it. And I have them also through my website. 20 years. And a lot of the quotes were from native New Yorkers in the show. So thank you.
Evan's website and his email is posted in the chat if anybody wants to take note of that. And this will be posted on the Phoenicia Library website along with his earlier 2 presentations. So if you missed any of this or want to share it with someone, please go there and definitely celebrate Native New Yorkers' 20th anniversary.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And it's an honor. So yeah, please do. All 3 fit together. So you kind of go back and look and it gives you a whole story. It's great. Thank you to all the people of Phoenicia and to, of course, Elizabeth also, and to Mary.
And thank you for honoring us with your presence and your knowledge and wisdom and your great interest. It's contagious.
Oh, good. Glad to hear that. That's great. One thing that's contagious that we like, right?
Yeah, exactly. We'll take this kind of contagion.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's been a fun evening. And thank you. I don't know if I've ever really, went as in depth before about the spirituality of altitude.
That was very cool, especially tracing it with the other cultures as well.
Yeah, it's
fascinating.
that is recognized. The sacred mountain as a symbol is found in almost every religion. It's found in every continent, and most cultures, ancient cultures, all have the concept of a sacred mountain. Even Thomas Merton referenced it.
Okay,
But yeah, it's
guys,
universal.
this is your last chance for questions. Reveal your faces and speak up.
Thank you.
Getting nice comments, very positive comments. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay.
Evan, what an honor. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome, Mary. Climb a mountain, everybody.
Right on.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Have a good evening.
Okay.
I'll just hang it.
Bye, Mary.
I'll be in touch with you if I.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Well, thank you, Mary.
Take good care.
I'll see you again.
Okay.